Free speech is not hateful. Free speech is not something that oppresses. Free speech is not something that marginalizes. Free speech is actually the way that anyone in Canada, anyone in a freedom-loving country, can find a way to work through whatever disagreements and discourses society has. This shouldn't need to be uttered. This shouldn't need to be driven into people's minds, but apparently it does. The latest standoff for free speech exists in Toronto's library system, where Meghan Murphy, a prominent feminist writer, is due to give a speech in just about a week's time, a speech that has become subject to protests and attempts to deplatform, and even attempts to have the city-owned library deny her a speaking space. Now, the reason that this left-wing feminist is finding herself at odds with other left-wingers is that she takes the radical feminist view of transgender identity, namely that you can't just become a woman, that if you have a penis, you shouldn't be entitled to all of the things that are there in society for womanhood, like access to women's shelters and women's prisons. You may find the point disagreeable, but it's her perspective, and more importantly, it's the perspective in a debate that exists right now in Canada, a debate that some people on the other side of it want to have shut down. Now, thank goodness Toronto's library is actually standing up for free speech. The city's librarian has given a very strong statement defending free speech, not even just from Meghan Murphy's perspective, but in general, the idea that we should not have city agencies or government agencies telling people, no, you're not allowed to have a room because we don't like that perspective. The problem, however, is that the left does not accept the premise that free speech is a good thing. The left accepts that free speech is about finding ways to slice and dice it and finding this caveat or that caveat, finding all of the excuses possible so as to not have to uphold free speech. Like saying, oh, but it's not free speech if it marginalizes other people's free speech. Or, oh, what about the rights of the people against whose rights she's speaking? What about them? But all of this is made up. No one is saying that transgender people shouldn't have the right to speak up. In fact, I would encourage them, if they have an issue, to book a room at the library and have their own discussion, have their own session that offers a counter-narrative to the position that Meghan Murphy is putting in. If a private business, a private venue wants to say, you know what, we're not comfortable hosting this belief, they should have that right. Governments, however, do not. Toronto Mayor John Tory gave a ridiculous statement in which he said, I don't think it's the role of politicians to decide who should get to book space and who shouldn't, but even so, I'm telling the librarian I want her to reconsider. The librarian, to her credit, a woman by the name of Vickery, has not given in. She has said time and time again she is not going to reconsider. She gave an interview with CBC's Carol Off in which she similarly stood firm on her support of free speech, which she says in a library of all places is supposed to be embraced. But what she also had to deal with was a question that basically tried to pin violence against transgender people on those who support discussing transgender issues freely. This is the question that Carol Off had put to her. She said, well, given what trans people have to deal with, how is it just about free speech? This is a paraphrasing of the question, which you can see up on the screen there. And thankfully, the librarian didn't take the bait. She said, look, I'm not at all talking about trampling on anyone's rights, which is why we need to embrace free speech. We are living in times now where free speech is not seen as a virtue. It's not seen as an unalienable right. It is seen as something that gets in the way of a progressive narrative, which makes it all the more important to stand up for free speech. Not because it dismantles progressive narratives, for the opposite reason. Free speech is there for everyone. And you'd think that libraries of all places would understand that. Thankfully, in Toronto, they do. For True North, I'm Andrew Lawton.